to be on this panel. I'd like to call my colleagues, Engineer Bello Tungo, from the founder and CEO of Tungsten Company in Nigeria. Let's give him a big round of applause. Come on.
Round of applause, everyone.
Wake up. All right. And Mr. Alexander Zeltov, founder and CEO of Educate Online. Originally from Russia, but he is in the US and globally. I think he has some work also in India. Last but definitely not least, I would like to call on Mr. Puneet Kumar, co-founder and CEO of SOE Global India. Want to make sure your mics are working? Okay?
Yes.
Working. All right, good. Okay. As Mr.
Keep your finger on the button, sir. The green light will come on.
Okay, so pros and cons of peer learning. And as explained earlier, as educator, we try to seek the best strategies for the students to reach their potential. So one of these strategies is peer learning, also known as cooperative learning. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Bello, in terms of preparing for peer learning, teachers as well as students, what are the main elements that we need to make peer learning a success or an advantage, let's say?
I think, thank you for having me on this panel. I think for me, from my experience teaching in a primary school and also in the secondary school, what has worked best for me is that right from the beginning of the session, I get the students to understand that part of the requirements and expectations of them as in terms of their performance for the year is that they are required to actually be peer educators to each other, but also peer assessors or peer evaluators. So right from the beginning, from the start of it, setting that expectation and also giving them the sort of, I don't know, maybe I should call it assessment rubrics and things to expect as far as top performance is concerned, it really helps. So for me, what works best for me is in terms of setting the expectation at the right time, from the beginning of the academic session, beginning of every semester, every term, and that also, as much as possible, when those exercises happen, it's good to have a collective sort of feedback session together with everybody so that we know that what we had expected, we had set for ourselves, is also what's being carried along and what's being achieved also.
Okay, and which grade level were you teaching?
Yes, so I've taught primary 2, primary 4, 5, 6, and in the secondary school level, I've taught grade 7, and also grade 11, 12.
Okay, so about to finish. Across all grade levels.
Yes, exactly. It's more difficult to do it at grade 11 and 12 from my experience because they are about to take their final exams and go to college or university.
So they need an adult as a teacher.
Yes, exactly. But because at that point, their priority is just passing the standardized exams to go into university. But even at that, you can use those expectations in the standardized exams to get them to coach each other.
Exactly.
Because for those exams, most of the times, it's about coaching and mentorship and also really making sure that they keep to the expectations of the exam body. So for me, this is what has worked for me, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander, how would you be able, since your platform is totally online, education online, so how would that be applicable online?
I guess. Thank you so much once again for inviting me to speak here. So one of the things is that when the students learn online, they can have a different class size. Like some students will study in a class of 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. We see that the students, we're teaching international students online in the UK, US, Canada, and we see that these international students, once they see maybe somebody of their age that knows English or any other subject better than they do, they really become motivated by the success of that student. They start to learn from each other. So I think there are a couple of things. One thing is the motivation. When they see that somebody knows this and they're like, wow, they can do this. There's a real life, or maybe can do something, right? There's a real life example, and I think this motivates them. Another thing, of course, is connecting students online based on their competencies. For example, one student may understand maths better, but another student will understand geography better. And they can coach each other about the subject, and we aim to facilitate that in our community online. So I guess these are the main two things at this moment.
Is there someone who monitors their online, coaching?
Of course, we have academic managers who take care of that, and they are also teachers who are basically not present 100% of the time, but they oversee the whole process. And I think when the students study internationally, they understand that it's their responsibility to be successful in the international student, academic, and then, of course, the professional environment as well, which means that they really grab this opportunity and they become really responsible for what they do. So we don't really need to kind of interfere as much. And one of the learnings, I guess, from the whole international education field is that empowering the students to be responsible for what they do is really something that helps, because I'm from Russia originally, and in Russia we're like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, don't go here, don't run, here you can run, here you can't. And honestly, it was, these boundaries didn't help, because kids, if we talk about K-12, the kids are there to explore, and they're there to kind of learn something new and to discover, and it's okay to make mistakes. And I think once we teach the students in the international environment, we need to make sure that they can make mistakes and learn from them. And we try to create this learning path in this format.
Thank you. Now we come to Mr. Kumar, who's going to share with us what disadvantages do we have from peer learning, or what you think would be a disadvantage.
Thank you for inviting me as a panelist. First and foremost thing, I would like to say that peer-to-peer learning is present everywhere, even in the classroom or even the workplace. It is present in informal method, but we are planning to make it as a formal way. Then there are a lot of disadvantages to it. So let's say, for example, the time commitment which is required. Now it requires a lot of scheduling. We need to make sure that it does not clash with the other class sessions. So if it clashing it, then what will happen is you will not be able to attend the classroom sessions. So peer-to-peer learning has various disadvantages. But before I speak on those disadvantages, I would like to highlight that this is one of the modules which we implemented in our institute. We have already implemented, and we are providing ACCA qualification as a coaching, and we are training students who are out of the class 12, and we implemented during this pandemic this peer-to-peer learning, and I found a lot of interesting things as well as some disadvantages. See, every different module has some pros and cons, but the weightage to the pros are more compared to the cons. But still, as you have asked me about the cons, I would like to highlight few points which I faced in my own academy. So the first thing which I was facing is students are really resistant. They are not open up for discussing. They are not open to share their ideas.
Is that because they lack confidence?
Yes,
or? Okay.
They lack confidence. Second thing is they have that sort of anxiety. What if they embarrass me in front of the audience? Okay. What if I get embarrassed if I don't have the answer for the question?
Okay.
So see,
and that's why you have to pair them with the right, like Engineer Bilal was referring to, a lot of the success for such a strategy is how to compare or pair them with each other.
Yeah, that is also a challenging thing.
For the teacher.
Not for the teacher alone. Yes, of course, for the teachers and the facilitators. Finding a right peer tutor and matching it with the tutor is not an easy task. Mm-hmm. It is going to be really difficult. In any level, you take whether it is a class grade or college or university students, not everyone knows everything.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
might be good in geography, but I will not be knowing everything about geography.
I understand. So that's why you pair them not necessarily in the same subject area with each other. So you know, if
No, no. What I mean to say is, I might be good in geography,
Yeah.
so I might be considered as a peer tutor for the geography subject.
Yes.
But certain areas are there where I might lack in few
Okay.
places. And if students ask that particular question, or let's say your peer tutor asks that particular question, I might feel embarrassed because I don't have answer for it, and I have been recognized as a peer tutor. So that embarrassing feeling, we don't have the safe environment.
okay.
So that is the first thing which I feel, which is a drawback. And second important thing is, parents are really skeptical.
Yes, they are.
So parents are paying a huge amount of fees to the educators, to the universities, to the colleges, and if you say them, look, your student is going to teach the other, your children is going to teach the other children, they are saying, they will be asking, then why, for
Why am I paying so
for?
much? Yes. Yes.
Why am I paying? If my children has to teach the other one, why should I pay more? It is not the student's job, it is not my child's job to teach others. So parents are very skeptical because they aren't sure about the impact. They are not sure about the impact, and they don't know how it will impact in the longer run. And the worst part is, in peer-to-peer learning, according to me, long-term impact is not easy to measure. It won't be that easy to measure. See, as an educators, we know that, okay, this will have a good impact. Student will develop their self-confidence, the communication skills will develop, and there are many other, in fact, I can share my own example. When I was pursuing ACCA qualification in Singapore, there was a friend of mine, his name is Hemant, and we both were in the same paper, auditing paper. We were preparing for the exam. Just one day before the exam, he came to me and he said, I'm a bit nervous about this paper, I don't know anything about this paper, and tomorrow is the exam, and ACCA is quite expensive in terms of examination fees. So I thought, okay, let me help him. So straight for 9 hours, from morning to the evening, straight for 9 hours, I sat with him and I covered the entire syllabus in just one single day. Now, why did that? Because it was mutually beneficial for me as well. I have to revise for the tomorrow's exam.
Yes.
Finding out mutual benefit is also a disadvantage, is a difficulty in peer-to-peer learning.
Okay.
See, I might be good in geography, he might be good in maths. Of course, you will ask him to be a tutor for me as a maths
In
subject, but if tomorrow is the geography exam, he will not, tomorrow is the geography exam, he will not help me with the maths.
You'll help him.
Yeah, I can help him, but the problem is finding the mutual benefits in both the ways. See, tutee and tutor, both has to be benefited. It's not just the one way.
But let's say that peer-to-peer learning is just one strategy that a teacher adopts. It doesn't have to be all the way, because we know how children learn with different strategies. So if you know your child or your student's learning strategy or the best way that suits him, you wouldn't put him under that pressure. We would find another strategy that would help him more.
I would definitely go for peer-to-peer learning
Okay.
if there are certain points which is considered.
And that's
The
what
first
we
thing,
go
it
back.
should be
Yes.
mutually beneficial
Yes.
for both the tutor and the tutee. Second thing, you need to consider the time scale and the schedules and all these things. And figuring out the schedule is also a challenging task for the tutors, for the teachers, not for the peer tutors, for the teachers. And the cost involved in it. See, tutors, these teachers, faculties and all these things, they are much accustomed to the traditional method of learning. If you tell them that, hey, come on, you have to change your learning or you need to bring something else, they are reluctant. They won't be able to bring that changes so immediately. This pandemic forced us to come into online. But before that, many of us were hesitating to come online. We were still thinking that offline is great. We will still continue to be in offline. We are making good, we are impacting a lot of students in offline. But when this pandemic hit, we were all shocked and we felt, okay, there is no other option, we have to go online. So that was something called compulsion.
Yeah, well, you're compelled into going
Yes.
into the online. But peer tutoring online.
Yeah, it's not compulsion yet. No organization. Or
But it is
university-
what, as Mr. Alexander was referring to, it is happening actually across the globe, not only within one, correct, Mr. Alexander, you're talking internationally as well. You pair students with each other.
Actually, we don't pair them; they pair themselves.
No, they okay.
The way it works is that I completely agree with your point, Mr. Punit. If you tell the teachers, guys, you have to ask the students to teach other students, then the teacher might also lose track. Like, what am I here to do? This is a new format for me. So I think the traditional boarding school example could work here, where you have a boarding school. The students are basically living there, and then they have the class hours. Then during lunch, they can come to their teacher if needed to ask for extra help. And then what happens in the boarding house is the fact that the students will just talk to each other, and as part of this communication, they will understand what they're good at and what they're bad at, and then it's like they can ask each other for help. And this is a very normal thing, because that's what we do. Like, we have one strong side, one weak side, and we can just exchange. And this is the economy, basically, in the learning economy. In the online environment, we just create the community of students where they can communicate, and some of them will play games together, some of them will teach each other, and it's basically they match themselves based on their goals and their interests, and I think it'll be quite hard to in a traditional classroom to start peer-to-peer learning. But one of the things that you see at maybe like business seminars or some motivational seminars is you have the speakers who'll say, and now turn to your friend and explain what you just heard in the previous like 5 or 10 minutes. And it's actually a great thing, because it's the students or the adults in the audience that, in this case, they're switching their focus from listening to actually processing the information and saying it out loud. And even I'm, as an adult, when I visit the conferences and the speaker asks to do that, I'm like, wow, that's a challenge. And to switch from the format of actually just not writing something, but actually explaining it in your own words. So I think whatever the new techniques are, the teachers maybe can implement them like step by step, just to get more understanding from everybody who is in the classroom.
Okay, thank you. Picking up on what Mr. Alexander was just saying, we will play a little game with the participants, and the audience as well. But I'd like to hear from the audience first. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to say an advantage, and in response to that advantage of peer learning, I'd like to hear what you understood from the panelists as a disadvantage to that advantage. Got it? Okay? Let's go. Okay. Learning occurs across different domains. What would be the disadvantage for that? Learning occurs across different domains, different subject areas. Yes? Could we give a mic for? Yes.
So there could be a lack of focus on the intended domain. So, they may learn other things, but not necessarily what you want them to excel in. That could be one disadvantage.
Very good.
And
You accept that answer, Mr. Punit? Yeah? Okay. All right. Next one. Students gain more feedback as they are working with a tutor to reinforce certain points that they lack. Specific development in cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domain. What would be the drawback of that? Repeat? Sure. Students gain more feedback as they are working with a tutor to reinforce certain points that student lacks. Specific development in cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domain that he lacks, this person lacks.
Okay, it's quite a, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer exactly in line with what the question is.
Okay.
But in my opinion, different learners come with different learning styles, different learning needs, and different learning ability to comprehend that learning at varying speeds.
Okay.
So, and therefore to lump all students into one sort of homogeneous whole is probably we're not. So I think there is a case for different students who have who are kinesthetic learners, they are audio learners, visual learners, and being able to, and therefore every episode, learning episode, must contribute in a certain manner, in a certain component to the entire holistic learning journey, right? So in my opinion, all of these come together in a form and shape where I have, in micro learning, 5 minutes I'm doing audio learning, and when I'm with a faculty or with I am able to question them and find out what mistakes I've made, and then go and validate it through a learning by doing mechanism, and then play and compete with somebody. That probably, in that, each of these fit in a very nice logical sequence.
All right.
That's how I think. I'm not sure if I've answered your question. In the first place.
So basically what I understand is that a student's social development could lack if they only get tutoring from one person. And that's why we were saying, or Mr. Kumar was saying that Alexander could be good with the maths, but I'm good with the geography, so it wouldn't benefit them equally if I were to put him to do all subject domains, correct? Okay, all right. Let's go for Mr. Bello here. Advantage. Tutors gain some training to teach teaching, and communication students using in this can act as experience for later life. You know, the tutors, the student tutors, learn from the experience of teaching others, which will help them throughout their lives. What would be the disadvantage for that?
I'm usually a very big proponent of that, because I usually tell even my team and my staff, and I tell people, you can't really say you have mastered something unless you can teach it. So now to find the disadvantage to that, well, I would say maybe that will lead to overconfidence, maybe.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because if you are always, especially, which is why Mr. Kumar's point was good earlier, that you need to know how to find or how to select who the main, especially when you're doing a peer, meaning one tutor among the students to maybe 4 or 5 other students. If that student is always the one that is picked all the time, you're almost sending a message as if to say he's the
wise
top,
guy,
yes,
the top, yeah.
and all that. And that may, if you...
And you listen only to him, not to the
Yes,
teacher.
yes. So in a way, you have to kind of balance it in terms of also you as the main teacher should know where the gaps of this one is and how he can benefit from other students. Otherwise, as I said, it depends on how you go about it, selection, and also what you assign the topic of tutorship to be. So if you don't really do it well, the disadvantage can be that it will lead to overconfidence, and then the child will relax and possibly be affected by how the other peers treat him, basically.
He
Because
could be
there's
outcasted,
envy,
actually.
yes,
Yeah.
and things like that. So I think that will be the possible disadvantage to
possible
that.
disadvantage.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Mr. Alexander.
It also weakens the relationship of teacher and the students.
I'm coming to that. Very good, okay. So Mr. Alexander, now, your part. Students begin to rely more on their tutor rather than the teacher. What would be the disadvantage? Which actually Mr. Kumar just hinted out a bit.
I think sometimes, especially if we're talking about students, let's say I'm a student and I got something wrong and now I'm trying to explain it to my friend, to my peer. And I guess there should be some source of knowledge like the teacher who actually knows what's going on. Because if I got the information wrong and then I pass this information the wrong way to my peer, then we'll both fail. So I guess that can be one of the disadvantages, because the teacher usually has a lot of experience and expertise in the domain. Another thing, of course, is the authority of the teacher, and in different formats in different countries, you'll see somewhere the teacher is like a friend or maybe the guide for the students. Somewhere the teacher is more like a general in the army, and it depends on the country by country, but it's really important for the students to kind of respect their teachers and to value their relationship. And I think students actually respect those teachers that contribute to them and that give them value. And I guess in order for the teachers to be really successful and to be seen as professionals in the long run, they need to be gaining this respect and trust from the students. Otherwise, we might jump to peer-to-peer, like mother to grandmother, grandmother to mother learning style, which is happening in families, which is good. But in the traditional learning environment, I think the teacher's role is there to stay.
On that note, let me just share a personal tutoring thing. During college, I loved literature, and it was a passion. So I had this talent, and that's when I knew I could be a teacher. I had this talent to deliver to my colleagues. So even older students would come to me and ask me to explain something to them, especially in literature. And it was very good at that time. There was no peer pressure. There was nothing. It was mutual benefit for both of us. Me finding out that, wow, I could be a teacher, and that's how I was put on the road to being an educator. And them actually gaining from my explanation, which is, as you said, you have to pair them properly. All right, Mr. Punnett, how can peer learning be of financial restraint and commitment?
So as I said, if it is an informal peer-to-peer learning, then it has no constraints.
Okay.
No financial, no time constraints, because here the formal teacher is not involved. So the cost is also not involved. I'm just helping my friend.
Like I was doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
No, say it's like in a school thing.
Yeah. But when it is in formal way, when it is put in the classroom, when it is put in the one part of module, that place requires a lot of cost and time commitment. The first thing is like a teacher cannot do all by its own. He or she needs a support staff who can help us in moderating, scheduling, monitoring the sessions, assessing the sessions of peer learnings, modules and everything. And it involves cost. And apart from that, it requires a lot of time. The
Preparation for
teacher has to cover their own syllabus, and apart from that, they need to work on this aspect as well. That which student has to be assigned to whom, what the topic it should be, and which topic is he going to talk, and there should be supervision of the teachers, because as he said rightly that, I mean, the knowledge, the information should come from the right source, and right knowledge should come. We never know, the peer tutor, maybe he might deliver a wrong knowledge based on what he has acquired. So there must be someone who monitors it. So it again requires
like
a lot
a
of
coach,
time for the
and
teacher.
time and money.
Yes, time and money both are involved in this.
Okay. I suppose the online also, Mr. Alexander, would cost a lot. Does it financially cost?
I guess if you compare it to like traditional school, international school, it costs 80 to 90% less. When the students are in the community, they don't pay anything for it. It's basically just time that they are willing to contribute to others. And we see that among students, they are not working yet, so yes, they have sports practices, they have their own stuff to do, but they also are building their portfolio for the universities that they'll attend as the next step. And if they say, I've been teaching this to my peers, I've been giving lectures, as you did, for example, I think they can actually stand out in terms of the university. But also it's about the skills that they gain. If they can teach something to somebody, if they can actually address not even one person, but an audience, this is a great skill for them to have. And we are not only thinking about their academic development, we're also thinking about their development as human beings and as future professionals. Because the earlier you learn like the basic skills, the better you'll do. And I remember when I was studying in London in Cass Business School at the age of 18, I was learned how to pitch my business ideas, like whichever. They're just in an extracurricular activity. And now I'm doing this with investors or doing this somewhere on stage. And basically, I'm really grateful that I've had this opportunity to learn that skill. And that's what we intend for our students to do as well, just to get as many skills that they think are relevant and that they think are fun at this moment, and this way they can develop further.
So in other words, do you think that digital learning, peer digital learning, could help the students change their attitude towards learning?
I guess peer learning in the digital environment is something really natural because, for example, at the university, when you study there, you have the lecture, then you have somebody who takes care of the smaller group, but then everybody creates a group on Facebook or any other platform, and they're doing coursework there, right? And I guess this peer learning is actually something that is already happening because they want to get together. It's much easier to do the work, especially coursework together. And I think if the schools actually look at what people do at universities, like the courseworks, and a lot of the schools are now introducing project work, which is great because there they learn from each other, and it's just really important to make sure that the students have empathy toward each other so they can actually listen to each other, because I think the younger we are as human beings, the more we have this certainty that I'm right, and we have to just show them that empathy, listening to others, maybe they have better opinions, and not better, but maybe they know something more in the field and you can actually gain from that. I think it's all about the core principles, and we have to work and address those in
So
detail.
that it actually nurtures their communication skills as well within the peer tutoring online.
I guess yes. Whenever you talk to somebody and somebody new and somebody who doesn't really get you and actually get your point across, that's a good learning curve.
All right. Okay, Engineer Bello, could you tell us how does peer learning help students achieve better academically?
Yes, I think in 3 ways, if I can just quickly mention them. As Alex mentioned just now, either way, they are communicating and they are almost learning. And by the way, this is how I also view education. For me, education is not just the passage of somebody standing in front of a class and teaching.
That's true.
Either way, the communication that is going on between the students is still knowledge that they are gaining. It's an education that is going on. When I tune into a radio and I'm listening to the information, it's education that is happening.
Yes.
So, to Alex's point, when they are communicating already, whether it's through social media or any other digital platform, or even within their classrooms, they are being educated by whatever information they are passing to each other. So for me, number one, as far as advantage is concerned, I would say they learn better. Basically, the quality of their learning or the education is better because they are learning or sharing or passing the information or whatever thing it is that you expect them to learn from one peer to another, rather than from an authority who is the teacher to you, the student. And so it makes it easier to absorb that learning or that education, whatever the content of it is. It's much easier to do that than through an authority who is a teacher, because whether we like it or not, as much as we try to build rapport and be friendly with the students, they have more rapport with each other than with us.
Because they don't want that authoritative teacher image, as it were.
Well, it's easier if it's from a peer,
Yeah.
because some teachers are very friendly and they really build good relationship with the students to a point that they look at, and I've seen this with some students of mine, they see me almost like part of their gang or part of their circle, social circle.
Because you're young.
Yeah, exactly. But also I relate to them and I try to also bring down myself to their level of when they are talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, I'm also saying, of course, he's the best, he's better than Messi and all that. So they see that, but this is the kind of conversations that happen amongst them. So them learning from each other, it's easier for them to absorb and accept whatever thing or whatever content of learning. And also, as I said earlier, for me, I always tell people that unless you can teach something to somebody effectively, whether it's a knowledge, a skill, or an attitude, you haven't really mastered it. So the quality of education or the quality of the learning is enhanced. That is one. Number two, quickly, collaboration and communication. We always talk about 21st century skills, 4Cs, critical thinking and all that, but that communication and collaboration amongst them, especially with the example that Alex mentioned, project-based learning, it really enhances the quality of output of the education or the project that they do. So that collaboration and communication helps. Finally, I think yesterday in the other room, in the other track, we were talking a lot about social and emotional learning. So I think this peer-to-peer learning or tutorship or peer review, peer feedback, peer evaluation, all of it adds to the social and emotional side of things. Because the students, they not just learn a lot about themselves, because mind you, you will think you really know something, but unless you have seen that, oh, I really cannot teach it, or I really don't know this thing, then self-awareness and self-management won't happen. And then social awareness, social management also happens.
So actually there's personal growth in that.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
okay.
especially on the attitude side of things. So I would say those three categories or those three sets of things are them very much the main ways I think that the quality of education and learning is enhanced by peer-to-peer learning.
Okay, thank you. Now, would you like any concluding words, Mr. Kumar, before we proceed?
So definitely I would like to say that yes, peer-to-peer learning was always there and it will always be continuing to exist in the informal way. But bringing it in a formal structure it will have a lot of challenges which we need to overcome. But overall, see, we all are social creatures and we like to socialize. So that is our human tendency. We like to socialize. It was so stressful for many in this pandemic when they were not able to connect with their friends, when they were not able to meet their friends. And this peer-to-peer learning helps them to connect with each other and helps them to transfer their education knowledge and everything. So definitely I look peer-to-peer learning as a future model, like how online has erupted during this pandemic. Very soon I feel that peer-to-peer learning will be one of the greatest module, and it will also be implemented formally, but it requires a lot of time and a lot of work behind it.
On what level? Are we talking about like university level, peer-to-peer?
Yes.
Or even postgraduate studies, peer-to-peer?
See, peer-to-peer
Because it
learning-
depends on the age group. I mean, it really depends on the age group if it's going to be effective or not.
Peer-to-peer learning, according to me, it should be from class 11 till university level or PG
11?
level. Yeah,
Oh,
because
yeah, well,
small
yeah.
children's, you cannot put them into peer-to-peer learning. Rather than talking about the subject, they will talk something else.
Oh, okay, you're right. About
So if it is graduate students or who are pursuing graduation or PG or class 11 and 12, they are serious about the subject. They are serious about the upcoming exams, boards. So they would be very serious.
That's
And
true, yeah.
they'll-
But they need to be trained on that strategy early on.
Yes.
So you can implement it early on, but it wouldn't be the core
See,
of how they learn.
training won't take much time because, as I said, peer-to-peer learning is already present in every school,
It's
organization,
yeah.
in an informal way. So they are very much familiar with this kind of model. The problem is when you make it in a formal structure, the time which is taken is not from the students' end. Training is required for the lecturers' end, for the
From the teacher
administration
act- yes,
side.
yes.
So they require a lot of training. But if you put the right student among the group, then it doesn't require a lot of training. They will definitely go with the flow.
And you mentioned parents. The parents need to change the culture,
Yeah, parents won't change that
their
easily.
mindset, yes.
Yeah, they won't change that easily. Unless and until you give them the results. See, these are the results. And then parents will say, wow, this is something good. Till that time, parents won't change, and we need to see. The thing is, like, there are many people who will agree, and there are few who will disagree. We just have to see which is the greater cause, which will bring a lot of changes in the student's life.
Which is more impactful for the
which
kids,
is more
yes.
impactful.
Yes.
We should work on that.
Okay.
Parents will automatically understand in some point of time.
Thank you.
If we can't make them understand, their own children will make them understand how it has changed their life and how are they growing in terms of subject, in terms of their self-confidence, in terms of their communication skills. So they themselves,
They will see that in their children growing, yeah.
exactly.
Thank you. Mr. Alexander, do you have any final thoughts?
I guess it's just, it's hard to change the mindset of parents. I totally agree. I'll become a parent probably in 1 to 2, 3 years, a couple of times. and other than I'm thinking, the theory is like this. Whatever my kids do, let them do it. Like if they fail the exam, okay, it's fine. Do it again. Kind of, really positive approach. But that's the theory. The reality will probably look a bit different because we still have a lot of the parent mentality, and it shows up in us as parents and as husbands and wives when we actually get into this. So I guess it's really important for the parents to be just more open to different new learning formats. And if you actually ask a parent, how have you learned about this? They either had a great peer or a great teacher that helped them. And they are seeing this teacher as somebody in like their close circle. They're really grateful to that teacher. I also think that it's possible to connect students for peer-to-peer learning not only in one school, in one environment, but actually across different schools. Because, when you talk about schools and universities, you say this university or school is good for maths, this one is good for management, this one is good for this one is good for that. If we could actually create an international and multicultural as well as multi-school, multi-university society that could really help the students to learn from each other. And sometimes you don't need to understand the whole length about geometry or calculus or whatever, you just need to understand the core principles. And the more they can share that with each other, the better. I hope the students also want the same, but we do understand that they're human beings and they're bombarded with lots of different information and knowledge every single day, and they want to relax. And time is one of the constraints as well.
What about your online platform? Does it introduce students from different schools, different nationalities to each other in the same, studying the same thing?
And it's beautiful because now there is a conflict happening between Russia and Ukraine, but the Russian and Ukrainian students are in one classroom along with Chinese students, Indian students, Nigerian students, Congo students, Brazilian students. You see that the kids, they actually really connect, and they're really curious and they're really supportive of each other, and that's just a beautiful sight to see, basically.
Definitely. Engineer Bello, do you have final thoughts on that?
Yes, final thoughts. I think my final thoughts will be, I mentioned earlier that it's really important, obviously, and as we know, reason why this topic was picked is because many platforms, even online or around most educators that have had good experience of it, they'll tell you they are all for it. So I think that is something that we can all accept. How we go about it, it's up to us. As Mr. Kumar mentioned, that sometimes time is a constraint. But let me just end by giving an advice as far as how to handle that time issue, because I've also faced it with my students. Sometimes simulation helps. So usually when given, especially on assignments, I just simulate a scenario and I tell student A that, how would you teach a student, so I create a scenario about another student in somewhere in Asia or wherever it is, or even in another school within that jurisdiction. How would you teach them how to solve simultaneous equations, for instance? How would you teach a Chinese student how to do simultaneous equation in Chinese? So I'm basically integrating mathematics with languages. So what I do, what helps me with the time issue, is I give assignments, such assignments for them to really go and think of how they will teach a particular topic or a subject or an issue, challenge that a student is facing. But the way they present that information is also in different ways that I do it, because they all have different skill set or talents. Sometimes they do it in a narrative way. Sometimes I tell them in a 1-minute video, film yourself teaching simultaneous equation, to a student that is having challenges with the elimination method or with this method and that method. So sometimes to handle the issue of the time constraint, that's what I do. And so they go home and then they do it. But as I said, it's important you set the standard from the beginning in terms of what you're looking for as far as high quality is concerned, so that when they are going to do the assignment, they know that, okay, if the simultaneous equation or whatever topic it is is in this way or that way, then that means I'm on the wrong track. So the standards have to be shared with them also so that it will guide whatever they are creating in terms of that, simulation of peer learning. So sometimes that helps. Or sometimes even you can just peer them and then send them off on their homework to really teach each other so they can do it as assignments. That will help the time issue. So for me, that's what has helped with the challenge that Mr. Kumar mentioned on time as far as peer learning is concerned.
So to sum up, actually peer learning is beneficial. We can get around the time constraint, we can get around the financial constraint. It builds more self-esteem into the students' confidence. And I think we have 4 minutes for any questions or inquiries, if you'd like to ask any. Yes, please. By the way, we as adults, we're also learning from each other. So that's another way of peer learning.
Absolutely.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so great discussion there. So I'm Vaidi from Chennai, India. So I have been developing peer learning solutions for a lot of my clients. And one of the things that I have noticed seems to contribute towards the success of peer learning is the shift in mindset from teaching to facilitation. Because oftentimes what happens is we take the position of a teacher and we try to teach in a peer learning environment. Because in a peer learning environment, I normally find teaching, rather than teaching, if you go into the mode of facilitation and make the whole learning process implicit, I think that does a lot of benefit in this particular model. So I would like to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, now the teachers are called facilitators. No, not the teaching, not the, the authoritative type of teaching like the traditional type. True. Any other questions? Yes, Mrs.
Okay, thank you very much for such an interesting discussion. That reminds me with something happened to me a couple of years ago. I used to teach grade 11 and 12 English literature. So one day I walked into my class. I decided to give them a pop quiz. So I prepared 2 sets of quiz, the same questions, exactly the same. And then I asked my students to sit the first half an hour of the session in a very classical, traditional seating way for taking their quiz, in which they did. I gave them the first paper test to take the quiz, and then I monitored them and I proctored my class. It was a very strict class. They were working individually. Then I asked them after half an hour to stop work, put their pencils, pens down on the desk. I collected the papers. Then I paired them the second time. I paired them and I distributed the paper test for the same thing, the same question again. At the beginning, I noticed they were working individually, and I said, no, it's a paired test. Talk to one another, discuss the questions that you left out, and solve the test again. At the beginning, they feared. They didn't know what to do. They were looking at me, looking at one another, didn't know what to do. Then I encouraged them, talk, discuss, and write what you think is right, in which they did, and they were so much engaged in answering the questions they left at the first paper. At the end, when I corrected both sets, the result of pairing the quiz was much higher than the result of when they worked individually. So even it's not about peer learning, it's even when assessing them, when I paired them, the results was really much better. So definitely I think, as one of the panelists mentioned, that peer learning really promotes inclusive change inside the learning environment of any classroom climate. Thank you so much.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Sorry. Any other questions? Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you very much, panelists.